Well, welcome back to the Piney Woods Homestead, y'all. Today is a walk and talk. The sun is actually trying to come out, if you can see it just a little bit shining on me. Thankful for that. It's been nothing but a deluge of rain for, seems like going on 2 weeks. Don't know if we're out of it. It's gonna heat up today, probably bring some more storms. In the meantime, we're gonna enjoy this vitamin D. We're gonna do a walk and talk today, guys. Probably gonna be a gator sit and talk. We're gonna talk about signs of the times. Let's get into it. Let me get my handy dandy notepad out that I use to take notes, and I'll be straight up with you. Today's took me some time to put together, talking about this sort of thing, but we're going to start off in Luke chapter 21, and I've really got to get better about marking where I'm reading from, but that was pretty easy to get to. Luke chapter 21. Going to read a few different verses, y'all. And I'll go ahead and preface before I even start with this. There is way more that we could dig into out of Luke chapter 21. I'm focusing on just a few verses. And on today's walk and talk, sit and talk, gator talk. So don't think for any second that I have covered all of it, because I know a lot of times people are like, but, yeah, but I'm focusing on really just a few things this morning. So just so that you'll understand the context of where I'm going from. Luke chapter 21, starting in verse 7, we're going to read 7 through 11 here. Then we're going to read verse 25. So they asked him, Jesus, saying, Teacher, but when will these things be? And what sign will there be when these things are about to take place? And he said, Take heed that you not be deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time has drawn near. Therefore, do not go after them. But when you hear of wars and commotions, do not be terrified, for these things must come to pass first, but the end will not come immediately. And he said to them, Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilences. And there will be fearful sights and great signs from heaven. And I'll skip on down to 25 here, because remember, I am just picking a few things out of here. Verse 25. Jesus is saying again, And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nations, with perplexity. Perplexity also means confusion, great confusion. The sea and the waves roaring. So I kind of want to break this down into 5 different points that Jesus is talking about there. He mentions false prophets. You can take that as false prophets, false preachers, false teachers. He mentions rumors of war going on, nation against nation. He mentions famines, pestilences, earthquakes in various places, etc. He mentions sign in the moon, the sun, and the stars. And he mentions distress of nations with perplexity, confusion, great confusion. Sea and waves roaring. And that could be literal or symbolic of just how rough the times are, how the sea foams when you see the waves crashing on the shore. It makes a great sound, and there's a lot of foam that comes up. And if you've ever been to the coast right before a storm, you see much larger than normal waves, much more foam. Even the noise of the waves breaking on the shore is so much more profound. So guys, kind of how I'm approaching this today is from my law enforcement background, detective background kind of thing. I was never a detective, but I did internal investigation, so I guess I was kind of a detective. And I also did background investigations for potential new hires. So there's a lot of investigatory work, even just as a regular patrol officer for all those years I did that. Plenty of investigatory work. So that's what I'm doing here as I'm taking a look at those 5 things I mentioned where Jesus was talking about there. And we're going to start off with apostates, false preachers, etc. And before I get too far into it, I want to read out of Jude chapter 1, verses 12 through 13. And it's going to kind of help us to understand these apostates, false preachers and such. These are spots in your love feast, while they feast with you without fear, serving only themselves. They are clouds without water, carried about by the winds, late autumn trees without fruit, twice dead, pulled up by the roots, raging waves of the sea, foaming up their own shame, wandering stars for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. So that kind of gives us a definition of these false teachers, preachers, apostates, apostasy in general. Can you think of any false teachers and preachers right now? And I'm sure that you have already had at least one, maybe 2 or 3 pop into your head. These are, for the most part, so-called preachers, pastors, teachers, prophecy teachers that are out, first and foremost, you can tell it, for monetary gain. That's what they're out for, that and popularity. They are ear ticklers. They are going to tell you things that you want to hear. And they know exactly how to lean in on you. If you are fearful over the times that we're living in, and a lot of people are, they're going to hit you on every single one of their teachings with fear-based biblical doctrine, where they are going to show you everything that's going wrong in the world. Yes, I do that from time to time, but I'm not hitting on it every single week. I am not trying to sell you the latest book that I have wrote, because I have not written any to start with. I'm not trying to get you to send in money to support the ministry. I'm not trying to get you to buy the latest survival tools. I'm not trying to tickle your ears and tell you that if you do all these things, you're going to be financially blessed. None of that stuff. First and foremost, what I'm trying to do right here is encourage the body of believers, and hopefully, some that are lost will come into the fold because of the gospel being taught. And so that's first and foremost. If a pastor, teacher, self-proclaimed preacher, any of these things, I never proclaimed to be a preacher. I am not a preacher. I'm not qualified to be. I'm just a born-again believer that loves Jesus, loves people, or I wouldn't be sharing these messages each week, hoping to bring some encouragement or plant a seed that might spring up to salvation in someone else. Because I do believe the time is near. This time is near for all of us, y'all. Never know when our next breath is going to be, much less the end of the world. And so that's why I do these things. So these are some ways that we can look out for these false teachers and preachers. Just recently, big thing in the news the past couple of days, and I'll hit on it, I don't mind. This supposed self-inflicted taking of a life in North Carolina from a family out of South Carolina. And if you've been following the news at all, you've already seen this. Got some bad vibes coming off that deal from that fella that's supposedly preaching the word. I don't see the life, the fruits hanging off of this person that would indicate that they are nothing more than an ear tickler. And so these are just some things that you can use discernment, and we're going to get into discernment here a little bit later and how that you can have that. But ear ticklers, you got to watch out for them. They got a lot of these big churches that have celebrities in them, and you'll think, well, if that celebrity that has done all of this, sang all this music, done all these movies, such and such, they've donated so much money to world hunger, if they're there and they're buying into what this preacher is saying, it must be right. Run from that junk. Run from it. I would look for the preacher and the teacher that's preaching the Word of God, sound doctrine. First and foremost, there's only one way to heaven. That's through Jesus. Faith in Him. So be prepared for all kinds of bull malarkey out here that you're going to have to wade through. All right, moving on from the apostasy that's running rampant and has been forever. Wars and rumors of wars. What is really the biggest thing going on right now? The Israeli and Hamas conflict, as they call it, because conflict sounds so much better than war. Political correctness, y'all, been going on for way too long. It's war. It's blood. It's shoot 'em up, bang, blow 'em up. It's not pretty. And it seems like a lot of people, and it's not everybody, a lot of people are against Israel. And we as Christians need to remember that Christ Himself was Jewish. And I'm not talking that every single Israeli is Jewish. I know the difference. I know the difference between an Arab Israeli and a Jewish Israeli. I know there's a difference, but I'm talking about the nation of Israel in specific right now. They are on the offensive. For years, it seems they've been on the defensive, but they're on the offensive right now. And we've got young people in universities across the globe, really, protesting. But what are they really? They're trying to get something for themselves in these universities. And it's ridiculous how people have just bowed down and cowered to this bull malarkey instead of nipping it in the bud. And I think they're just scared to nip it in the bud because ultimately they are scared of lawsuits and public perception. I'm done with public perception, y'all. I'm done with it. I spent 15 years making sure that every little thing I did was right by the book. I'm talking about in law enforcement, right by the book, and that the public perceived it well. And unfortunately, that's just something that they have to wade through because, Lord have mercy, when you're in that type of work, whether it's military or law enforcement, you definitely want the public on your side because you're trying to uphold the Constitution. You're trying to uphold the laws that are on the books. And the last thing you need is a big uprising, people not wanting you to uphold actual laws. I'm not getting into all the crookedness and all that. We know that it's there too. That's not what this is about. But this is about, my focus right here is Israel, Hamas. Now, that's not the only thing out there that's been going on. We've had the whole Russia-Ukraine thing now for a couple of years. Let's see, what else? We got the stuff that's been going on in Africa for ages, civil wars, genocide. We've had threats of civil war, rumors of it here. Even got a movie out about it. I think they're trying to lead you in to what they're wanting to happen. And it may happen. Who knows? I mean, just the other day, I was reined in and bored. And so I was looking through like some YouTube movies because we don't have paid for TV. We just have YouTube. That's what we use. And I saw this one called Contagion from like 10 or 11 years ago. And I was like, I know what's that. Well, I cut that thing off about halfway through because I got so mad because it was like the manuscript for what we went through, what, 2019 to really still ongoing. And I was so mad. I just cut that thing off because I said, good gracious. That was 10 years prior, but it was a perfect manuscript for what went on. All right, now I'm not encouraging you to go out there and watch these movies. This was just, I was bored, it was raining, and I was wanting to watch something, and once I saw the gaslighting there, I was like, golly, I'm just going to cut this thing off. But moving on from wars and rumors of wars, y'all. Been wars, been rumors of wars forever. And we're going to learn how to kind of sift through what is a sign of the times that we're living in and what's not. But so from wars and rumors of wars, what about pestilences, earthquakes, signs from heaven? Start off with world hunger. That could be considered a pestilence. Been going on forever. Since I can remember, there have been infomercials on African world hunger. And y'all, bear with me. The more I talk out here in this humidity, sometimes the less oxygen gets to my brain and I get to slurring. So I may have to pause and come back. But world hunger. We in America have not truly in our generation experienced world hunger. However, if you look back during, 1929 is when Black Friday is what they called it, when the Great Depression hit, a lot of people experienced hunger because there were bread lines, people were out of work. But down here in the South, these folks down here were experiencing a lot of that prior to the Depression because remember, that was Reconstruction after the war between the states. And they were eating what they grew. And if they didn't have a good crop year, probably wasn't a whole lot to eat, but they hunted, they trapped, they fished, and people were rural. But Depression had already hit them, but when it hit other parts of the country, there were people going hungry. And there are still people going hungry in America, and a lot of the times it's based on things you wouldn't think about. There is all types of assistance for people that do not have the means to buy food, but a lot of times they will trade those vouchers for other things that they want more, and so then their kids go hungry. And then it's up to the school systems and food banks and churches to provide meals. Even police departments, ours used to do it, had this thing called hot dog with cops or something like that. They go out and grill up a bunch of hot dogs and make sure that those that were living in those areas that maybe their parent or parents were trading off these food vouchers for something else, read between the lines, make sure they got a meal. So there is still hunger, but I'm talking on a mass scale here. Where have we seen hunger on a mass scale? A lot of it in Africa right now, and has been for years. We've seen it publicized. All right, so world hunger, always been an issue somewhere, always. Moving on, pestilences. These have been ongoing in all of recorded history. Now, some of them, though, I believe are man-made. A lot of them are man-made. So we have to sort through what is a sign of the age, of the times we're living in, what's not. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But so pestilence has always been, there's more coming. There's more coming. I'm pretty sure that we have been and are still being conditioned for what is to come. Now, all right, I kind of lost my focus there for a second, but earthquakes, pestilences, earthquakes. Who remembers, not that long ago, April the 6th of 2024, the 4.8 earthquake that hit, I believe it was New Jersey. It was felt all the way up to New York City, if I'm not mistaken. And some people were like, oh, but there's been earthquakes forever. Yes, there has. Yes, there has. I want to look at it on a generational time frame, not on all throughout history, on a generational here. And I've got a quote here from the governor of New York when this happened. The governor said, and this is quotes, it was one of the largest on the East Coast in a century, 100 years. So one of the largest on the East Coast in a century. As you all know, earthquakes are pretty common. You can look at earthquake tickers all around, whether it's got Dutch Sense on YouTube or USGS. You can see where they're all popping off. But as far as big ones on the East Coast, I can't recall anything bigger than that 4.8 that was Pennsylvania and up north. I remember one that was maybe in the high ones or low twos in, I believe, the western part of North Carolina when I was maybe in middle school. So it's not something that's very common out here, but diverse places. You're used to earthquakes hitting in certain places around the globe. You're not used to them hitting in other places. All right, great signs from heaven. I'm going to read something here out of Revelation, chapter 12, and a lot of you probably already know where I'm heading with this. But chapter 12 of Revelation, and I want you to go read it. I want you to read it. It's just easier if you go read it right now. It's talking about an event that was going to happen. And I believe that it has happened on September the 23rd of 2017. It was a certain conjunction of certain amount of planets and stars. And it was over Israel at a certain time of the day where it could actually be seen, like it was either twilight or daylight or dusk. I can't recall now, but I remember reading about this and then seeing some teachers, preachers talking about it. And the more I dug into it, I was like, yeah, it does make literal sense. So literally, it made sense. So that is a great sign from heaven. And that was almost 7 years ago. One of God's, I see. That's like a perfect number, right? So I do believe that that was a sign in the heavens. And the heavens are not just limited to what's beyond our atmosphere. It was pretty much accepted in biblical times that the heavens started in this atmosphere right here. The first, the second, the third heavens. That was kind of how it was understood. So I look at even weather events, extremely large weather events that seem to be out of the norm. Tornadoes, hurricanes, typhoons, different things, y'all. I look at those things and try to look and see, all right, what maybe is a sign of the time, what maybe isn't. The last one, here recent, the northern lights becoming southern lights. That's something I've never seen in my entire life, y'all. Never heard tell of it. Know that it's something that is fairly normally occurring in certain parts of the globe, but not down here in the South. And there's even been some people that have been like, I think it was man-made. I think it was radiation. Who knows, y'all? I don't know. All I know is that they tell us, that the sun blew off a bunch of energy, and because of it, you could see the auroras down here in the South. Either way, y'all, it is a sign in the heavens of something spectacular that has taken place. What it means is up for debate. But I find it very interesting that that occurred. Not only that, but I found out by looking on NASA, I think it was nasa.gov or something like that, that the moon is actually rusting, turning red. Got something to do with particles being blown past the earth to it, creating a rust on the atmosphere of the moon. Well, we know that the moon shall be turned to blood. Maybe it's a literal thing as far as the look of it. These are just things to ponder, search the scriptures, and pray about. So these CMEs are coronal mass ejections, so they're called. It's wild, and they say it's like an 11-year cycle. Nothing new here, folks. It happens every 11 years. Whenever somebody says, nothing new here, folks, it happens all the time, there's probably more to it than meets the eye. It's a good way to keep people from being alarmed. Now, there's a fun fact about the sun that was also, I got this off of NASA, so take it with a grain of salt, but They say the sun is 330,000 times bigger than the earth. 330,000 times bigger than the earth. How old was Jesus when he went to the cross? And that is even debated, but I believe he was around 33 years old. Around 30 when he started his ministry, 33 when he went to the cross. I find that an interesting correlation. He is the Son of God. The sun is 330,000 times bigger than the earth. I just find that interesting. I think it's the way that science matches up with the Bible. I just think it's a nuance, something interesting to ponder over. Now we get to distress of the nations with perplexity, seas and waves roaring. Total confusion. Let's look here at America. Our president is confused. You can't watch any of the sound bites, that's what they call it, sound bites, video clips, and not tell that there's not some level of confusion there. I'm not poking fun. I'm just stating a fact. You can tell there's confusion there. Now, if the leader of your country, so-called leader of your country, is that confused, how confused are the rest of them? But it's not just here. It's all across the globe. There's confusion abounding everywhere. Deception and confusion abounding everywhere in all facets of life, y'all. There's fear. There's fear mongering. It's a constant. It's a daily in the news. It's a daily on YouTube channels that have way more views than ours do. It's a constant thing. There are certain things that bring in money. Fear, sex, violence, and sometimes educational videos. But I'm talking about what really brings in views. People will click because of a thumbnail. And men especially know where I'm going with that. People will click because they think they can make some money. People will click because they see something that looks hopeful and they have no hope. I would rather somebody click on one of our videos because they're running low on hope and are needing some hope, because we're going to bring it to you right here through Christ, because our hope is in Him. Inflation. Nobody can say we're not living in some crazy inflation. Let's just take a look at food. Y'all know how much it has drastically increased in the past several years. Land is drastically increased. Land is your only good investment. And that's the truth, because it is not going to decrease in value. That's just a little tidbit. I'm sure that everyone already knows that. I guess if a landfill got built next to it, that would probably not be good. But in general, I think you know what I mean by that. But inflation, it's gone to the point that, let's say you're a young couple, even have a college degree, you got a couple of decent paying jobs. It is hard if anybody wanted to, say, start a small farm. If you didn't come into it by way of generational of passing that down, buying that farm from your parents or something of that nature, it's really hard to get into it because everything has gone so commercialized. But the sea and the waves roaring, I talked about that briefly a minute ago. If you've been to the ocean, and not everybody has, but I love the ocean. Lisa loves the ocean. When it's gentle and calm, it just flows in nice and calm, small, at least on our coast, small 2-foot little waves breaking and not much foam, and it runs up. But when there's a storm coming, when there's a storm coming. Everything's foaming. Everything's much louder. Everything seems to be going bananas. Now, how can we know that the signs that we are seeing today are end time signs? And that's kind of where I want to tie this in. We have to be able to discern the times. And what did Jesus say about discerning the times? Here's what he said. Let's go back to Matthew. Matthew chapter 16. Before I do that, hold your thought on Matthew. I had something else marked here, and let me get to it. So bear with me. Come on. Come on. Almost there. Thin pages out of James. James chapter 1. Verses 5 through 6. Chapter 1. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. We need wisdom to be able to discern the times. We have to have it. And so if you don't have it, ask God. He will give you that wisdom. Now let me get back to Matthew, where I was going. And we will, Matthew chapter 16. Almost there. Verse 3. Here we go. Let's just start at number 1. Then the Pharisees and Sadducees came, and testing him, asked that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said to them, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. So how do we sort through everything that's going on? Do we take everything as a sign of the times? A sign of the times being the end of the church age? Christ calling us into the air? Or do we ask for wisdom? Do we pray to God for wisdom so that we can discern what actually is signs of the time? Do we look at the sky? And a lot of us can't even do that anymore. We rely on the weatherman, who is right about 1% of the time, it seems. But can we even look at the sky and say, well, tomorrow the weather's going to be pretty good? I bet you a bunch of sailors can. And a bunch of farmers can. But if we can do that, why can we not look at the totality of everything that's going on? Not one in particular thing. Not just the false prophets, the false teachings. Not just the wars and rumors of wars. Not just the famines, the pestilence, the earthquakes in various places. Not just the signs in the moon and the stars and the sun and the heavens. Not just the distress of the nations, the confusion, the deception. Look at all of it. Look at the foam coming up off of the waves that are crashing into the shore. Look at the totality of the circumstances. That's how we did it in law enforcement. We would look at the totality of the circumstances before bringing a conclusion to a matter. So don't just look at one thing. Don't just be caught off guard and say, well, I guess that because the sun does that at every 11 years, it's really not a sign. Or just because it's happened before back in 1800 and something, so it's happened, it's not a sign. Or just because this nation is starving doesn't mean anything because it's been happening for a long time. Look at the totality of the circumstances. Pray for wisdom. Use discernment. What is a sign of the end of an age? I believe if you look at the foam coming off of those waves that are crashing onto the shore all around, you'll be able to see clearly that we are experiencing some real signs. I hope that that's been a little bit educational for you, showing you how to sort through the weeds, find the truth, look at the totality of the circumstances. Guys, hope you have a good day. Hope you have a great week. And Lord willing, and the creek don't rise too high, we will see you on the next one.